Heinrich Schliemann became world famous for his discovery of Troy, although in reality he did not so much find it as destroy it. He is called a famous archaeologist, although the scientific community was very skeptical of him. Schliemann lived in St. Petersburg for 20 years and was a Russian citizen, but when he wanted to come visit his family, Alexander II put an exhaustive resolution on the petition: let him come. I will hang him. And yet this was one of the most remarkable and uncommon men of his time. Heinrich Schliemann was born in 1822 into the family of a Protestant pastor in the German town of Nubuko. His father, Ernst Schliemann, despite his pious profession and venerable age of 42, was a man of exuberance, a lover of drink, a spender, and a great ladies' man. Henry's mother, Louisa, dutifully endured the troubles that came her way. But one day her patience came to an end when her husband brought in a new maid, his mistress. The three of them did not last long. Louise died of nervous exhaustion, having made before her death a gift to her son, which, according to Henry's version, became for him a push on the road to the mythical Troy. Remembering her son's hunger for knowledge, his mother gave Henry a book by historian Herrera, General History for Children, for Christmas. Schliemann would later write in his autobiography that after seeing pictures of Troy, the city sung by the blind Homer in the immortal Iliad, he, being 7 years old, once and for all decided to find this city. Subsequently, more than one generation of sentimental romantics wept when reading these lines written by the great discoverer, memoirist, and mystifier. In reality, things were quite different. Omit the ugly details of his father's actions, which honors him. Schliemann composed the story of the gift to his mother as well as his entire biography. The famous folio is still kept as a relic in the family of Schliemann's descendants, but, as the postmark indicates, it was bought in a second-hand bookshop in St. Petersburg many years after the described Christmas evening. After the death of his mother, Henry was forced to go to live with his uncle, also a pastor. The uncle took the most active part in the fate of his nephew. First, he allocated money for Henry's education in the gymnasium, and after its graduation sent to the grocer's shop. The grocer, from whom Schliemann worked for nearly 5 years, paid him practically nothing, believing that he was paying him back with the knowledge that Heinrich gained by peddling in the store. Poverty is not shameful, it is only burdensome. Stupidity is shameful, he was fond of repeating. Seeing no further prospects for himself, Schliemann left the grocery store. He enlisted to work in Latin America. But then he suffers a setback. The ship on which he sailed, wrecked. Henry is saved by fishermen, and the future archaeologist suddenly finds himself in Holland. Is it such a failure? Amsterdam, at that time the business center of Europe, fascinates young Schliemann. He finally finds a place for his well-organized brain. Henry's hopes are beginning to come true. In Amsterdam he finds a job as a messenger, for which, unlike in a grocery store, he is well paid. But soon the new occupation begins to irritate Schliemann. If this keeps up, I'm going to go crazy. I must think of something useful to do, writes Schliemann in his diary. A man who speaks 2 languages is worth 2, Napoleon once said. Wanting to test the truth of this statement, Henry decides to learn foreign languages. And he starts with his native German, polishing the pronunciation. It was a worthy way to occupy his time. In the reception room of the port commandant, where they spoke mostly English, he memorizes foreign words, and on the way to the red light district, where he has to take samples of handkerchiefs, repeats what he has learned. He has almost no money for a teacher, but he has his own method of learning. It is necessary to read aloud a lot in a foreign language to learn not only to pronounce words with the correct intonation, but also to hear them constantly. Translation exercises, which have as their goal only the assimilation of grammatical rules, are not necessary at all. Instead of them, free compositions on some interesting topic or fictional dialogues. These essays are checked daily by the tutor. In the evening, the corrected essay is memorized by heart, and the next day it is read from memory to the teacher to correct mistakes in pronunciation. Using this method, Schliemann learned English in 3 months, French in the next 3. And then he took up Italian. However, his studies caused surprise and even condemnation of others. Oddball fired from one place after another. But he is not discouraged, and boldly goes to the richest firm in Amsterdam, Schroeder Co, and offers himself as a sales agent to work with foreign partners. "We don't take crazy people." The manager turns him away from the door. Is it a conceivable thing at 22 years of age to know 3 languages? However, Schliemann is so persistent that he, just to get away with it, is examined and, based on the results of the test, is immediately hired. The firm Schroeder Co conducted its trade affairs almost all over the world, so had a vast staff of translators. Schliemann not only knew languages, but also knew how to trade, that is, he worked for 2, receiving 1 salary. For Schroeder Co he was a godsend, especially since he did not rest on his laurels, and continued to improve his skills. During a year of hard work, the new employee achieved great success. The director of the company made him his personal assistant. At that time, the most favorable market for the firm was Russia. The market was huge and unsaturated, and there was almost no competition. The technical difficulty of its development was that the representatives of Russian trading companies, as a rule, did not speak any language other than their native tongue. It was difficult to conduct negotiations. Schliemann undertakes to remedy the situation and begins to learn Russian. Unexpectedly, he encounters a big problem. There are no Russian teachers in Europe. What a savagery in our enlightened 19th century! Bitterly exclaims Schliemann and develops another method of learning the language. He buys Russian books from a bookseller and begins to memorize them. A Russian-French phrasebook serves as a basis for him. After 3 months of hard labor, Henry appears before Russian merchants and tries to tell them something. In response, to his amazement, the polyglot hears uncontrollable laughter. The thing is that among the books he bought was an edition of Barkov's obscene poems banned in Russia. Their poetic vocabulary, and he learned. But Schliemann's speech so impressed the representatives of the Russian merchants that they immediately offered him to create a joint venture on shares, their capital, and his head. Schliemann was not accustomed to postpone decisions in a long box, and the next day went in a postal carriage to St. Petersburg. The way lies through endless snow, which still has to be turned into gold. While the Russian companions are collecting money for their common venture, Henry is familiarizing himself with the country. In just a few days, he travels all over St. Petersburg, finds out the prices of the goods he is interested in. In general, he does all the preparatory work. His restless mind demands new work, and chance provides it. From the windows of the hotel where Schliemann is lodged, the harbor buildings, abandoned before the beginning of navigation, are perfectly visible, while Schliemann, in the evenings admiring the port, calculates the possible payment for the rent of the warehouses they burn down. Immediately, that same night, Schliemann rents the almost burned-out buildings for nothing, and the next day he hires workers and, despite the frost, begins to build everything anew, guided by the plan of the port of Amsterdam, which he remembers well. In order to make Russian workers work in the European way, Schliemann is forced to direct the construction himself. That's where his memorized expressions from Barkov really come in handy. The spring brought Schliemann fabulous profits. Only as part of the port was rebuilt for the start of navigation and the revival of trade, so the rent of storage space was more expensive than ever. The money earned in the port allowed Schliemann to abandon his companions and open his own company. Over the next few years, Schliemann creates an entire trading company, specializing in the purchase of European goods in Amsterdam and selling them in Russia. But a well-oiled business is not for the restless Heinrich. He puts the business in the hands of the clerks, and himself with part of the free capital goes to America. In 1850, news came of the death of his brother Ludwig, who had gone to America to make a geschäft. For reasons that are not entirely clear, Heinrich decided to follow in his brother's footsteps to California, where he found himself at the height of the gold rush. With little cash on hand, Schliemann set up a primitive but profitable enterprise. He bought gold sand from miners on the spot and then resold it to a bank. He pocketed the difference. The business was quite risky. Schliemann wrote that he had to sleep with a revolver under his pillow, but the profits were fabulous. Schliemann returned to Russia already rich. Heinrich seriously connected his life with Russia. He entered Russian citizenship and officially became a merchant of the Second Guild, moved his brother and sister to St. Petersburg, married the niece of his business partner Ekaterina Petrovna Lazina. It was hardly a marriage of convenience. Schliemann stood firmly on his feet, but the daughter of a famous lawyer in the capital was not a landless woman. Henry long sought the hand of his chosen one and managed to convince her of the seriousness of his feelings. Soon the Crimean War broke out, thanks to which Schliemann's capital increased many times again. It is often written that he supplied the army with low-quality goods, but there is no evidence of this. Criminal cases against the merchant neither during nor after the war did not start. Charges were not publicly presented to him. In fact, Schliemann quickly oriented himself and, when trade with England and France for obvious reasons stopped, seized the market from competitors. By the way, the main part of the turnover of Schliemann's firm was tea and indigo, a dye for the textile industry. The turning point came in the late 1850s. The successful merchant languished, commercial affairs concerned him less and less. He lived by inertia, controlled affairs, a lot of sports, daily bathing in the sea, horseback riding, skating and gymnastics in the sports club, and learned languages, now Greek and ancient Greek. Schliemann set out to see the world: Germany, Italy, Egypt, Syria, Turkey, Greece. He returned to Russia, again plunged into business. He was elected a member of the commercial court, became a capital merchant of the First Guild, and an honorary citizen, but soon he left again, this time to travel around the world. Technically, he was traveling to study commercial offers to establish new trade ties, and that was partly true. Another thing is that Schliemann seemed to have already lost interest in commerce and was looking for a new application for his abilities. Schliemann described his journey in a book in French. There he confessed to his readers for the first time that, having encountered the ancient culture of distant countries, he regretted his lack of systematic education, without which it was impossible to understand the meaning of what he had seen. Schliemann returned to Russia and tried to convince his wife to go to Europe with him, but was refused. Then in 1865, he winds up business in St. Petersburg, withdraws funds, and goes to Paris. He invested the money in real estate, good just at this time in full swing reconstruction of the city by Baron Osman. Schliemann participated in the construction of 7 multi-story income houses. Having received a stable income, the 42-year-old rentier went to study. Catherine still flatly refused to go to Paris, and her husband's sudden urge to knowledge perceived as a whim, if not madness. But even in the registration of divorce to the spouse was denied. Apparently, it was at this time Schliemann matured 2 key decisions that determined his subsequent life: the desire to glorify himself in the scientific field and the idea of creating a new family. With his inherent enthusiasm, Schliemann set about putting his ideas into practice. The divorce was finalized in the United States. First, Schliemann and his lawyers presented in court testimony that Heinrich for the past 5 years without leave lived in New York and even has a stake in a solid local firm, which gave him the right to citizenship. Followed by a suit for dissolution of marriage, where Schliemann presented letters from his wife, in which she flatly refused to move with her husband. Obviously, these were forgeries, but the judges chose not to notice it. By the way, it was for the unauthorized acquisition of second citizenship and bigamy Alexander II promised to hang a former subject. Schliemann soon married a young Greek woman, Sophia Angastromena, who was almost 30 years younger than her husband. In fact, Heinrich bought a young girl who made this sacrifice to save his bankrupt family. But to start a scientific career, uneducated businessman needed some formal status. He managed to get it through the University of Rostock. On the advice of his brother, Schliemann sent there his books and manuscripts, for which he received a doctorate. There is no information about the commercial component of the transformation of a merchant into a scientist. Schliemann traveled a significant part of the ancient Oikumena, but only as a tourist. This later he will write, say, since childhood believed that Iliad Homer is not a fairy tale, as many scientists believed at the time, and an accurate description of the real Trojan War, clothed in mythological form. It seems that the researcher's appetite began to come to him at mealtimes. According to Schliemann's description, on August 8, 1869, he first set foot on the land of the Asia Minor region of Troas. Guided by the writings of such authorities as the French art historian Jean-Baptiste Lechevalier and the Austrian diplomat and traveler Johann Georg von Hahn, who claimed that Troy was located at Bali Dajai, Schliemann surveyed the area on horseback for a week, but found nothing of interest. He returned to the port of Çanakkale to sail to Istanbul, but missed the ship. Here, allegedly, there was a completely accidental meeting that determined the fate of Trojan archaeology. But, most likely, in the house of the British consul in the Dardanelles Frank Calvert, Schliemann came on the recommendation of some of the Parisian historians or having learned about him from Murray's handbook. Calvert was considered an expert on the topography and antiquities of Troas and, most importantly, had experience in archaeological excavations in the area. He had already publicly expressed the opinion that the remains of ancient Ilion were to be found in the depths of Hisarlik Hill. Moreover, having realized the scientific value of this archaeological monument, he had already managed to acquire half of the hill. However, he had no money for excavations. In 1871, extensive work began, and Schliemann refused the services of professional archaeologists, deciding to follow everything personally. Calvert did not participate in the excavations. He was lying with an attack of malaria. The further is well known. Schliemann 2 trenches cut through the hill and really found a unique city, which was almost 1,000 years older than Troy King Priam. But he himself did not realize it, thinking that he had found traces of the events described by Homer. Schliemann loudly proclaimed his discovery, which caused legitimate skepticism among professionals who saw a clear discrepancy between the material and dating. And his amateurish disdain for excavation techniques and accurate recording of finds led to the fact that the monument was virtually destroyed for science. In his lust for fame, Schliemann managed to quarrel with Calvert, the Turkish government, and the scholarly community. When he smuggled out the treasure of Priam, he was even suspected that the objects were bought from looters or assembled from different layers. The accusation is not empty, because the entire hoard of the legendary king was worth many times more expensive than a disparate set of items. And Schliemann did not hide his desire to capitalize finds. He tried for a long time to attach Trojan gold, making offers to the British Museum, the Louvre, the Hermitage. In the end, when he failed to sell the finds, he donated the collection to Germany, for which he received honorary citizenship and an order. In 1945, the gold of Troy kept in Berlin ended up in the USSR, partly in the Hermitage, partly in the Pushkin State Museum of Fine Arts. And only in the 1990s the collection was first presented to the public. For the rest of his life, Schliemann tried to correct what he had done in his unbridled pursuit of fame. And he partially succeeded. He made peace with the Turkish authorities by paying for the stolen valuables. He admitted he was wrong and allowed scholars access to his materials. He completely changed his approach to excavations and later not only dug in accordance with scientific methods, but even improved them. For example, he introduced the rule of obligatory photographic recording of layers and individual finds in situ. Some scholars recognized his repentance and replaced anger with mercy. Others remained firm in their rejection. In 1876, Schliemann began excavations at Mycenae, where he discovered a funerary gold mask and decided that it replicated the actual facial features of King Agamemnon. The treasures of Mycenae became Schliemann's second great archaeological discovery. But he did not stop there and managed to make several more expeditions. Schliemann will still have time to open for science to rent those, to hold scientific conferences in Troy, to build a museum in Athens, to write several books. And his life path will be an example of the fact that labor and perseverance can achieve almost any heights. Heinrich Schliemann died in Naples on December 25, 1890 from inflammation of the ear, which bothered him all his life. The archaeologist's body was embalmed to be taken to the Schliemann's residence in Athens and given a lavish funeral ceremony. This was entirely in keeping with his character, for Schliemann himself admitted without too much modesty that he had been able to realize a dream that to many seemed like a fairy tale. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please subscribe to our channel, give us a like and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos. Share your impressions of the video in the comments.